Oh, I got that little notification on my watch. Little notification, Anthony. Do you have them set?
Yeah, I got the buzz. I didn't even look at it.
I get the tweets. I get the buzz. Look at you. You didn't even put your Twitter handle on here. I'll fix that for you. Sweet guy. Sweet guy at Russ Joy. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Nice guy. We didn't get to have like our normal pre-show banter.
No, we didn't.
I'm not even going to give you a hard time. I won't. Not today. Not today. I won't.
Okay.
Nice guy. Nice guy. How are you this morning? This
couldn't be any better. Let's just put it that way. Couldn't be any better.
True sarcasm in that statement. That's what it feels like. It feels like there's some sarcasm there.
There's always some sarcasm.
Always with you, never. What time are we out of here by, Anthony?
I don't know. I'll let you know. Okay. Probably 8:15 at the latest.
Okay. I didn't ask you, Siri. God. All right, here we go. Well, then, everybody who's watching on YouTube, who's used to us having a lovely pre-show chat about fun things like what's for breakfast and stuff like that.
Nothing. I didn't eat breakfast this morning. Thanks.
Oh, that's why you're Crankmaster Flash. That's why. You didn't have breakfast. Uh-oh. Did you make Maria mad? You made Maria mad.
I did not make Maria mad. Maria wasn't even home. Maria left 5:30 this morning for work.
So she can get up and she can go, but you can't. It's okay. It's okay. Here we go. Eat a Snickers. All right. Let's get into it. It's time. Ooh. Hunter on the way to Pittsburgh to see Phillies play a couple games. All right.
Beautiful stadium.
I love this. I should be working. Shouldn't we all?
Yes, so should I.
And yet we are here. All right. Matthew, the problem really isn't that we schedule these when you have meetings. It's that you should make sure that you schedule meetings to be nowhere near where we are. I just saw a human go behind you, Anthony. Oh, boy. You're not in the room, are you? Or are you?
I am.
Wow. Okay. What a good day. What a good day for you. All right. So there's going to be no Bundy bombs out of Ant based on what I just saw.
Oh.
Here we
You still might get one.
All right. Here we go. Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, the Only Flyers Podcast. I'm Russ Joy, at Joy on Broad. That is Anthony SanFilippo. You can find him on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. Ant, how are you?
It's just been a heck of a morning there, Russell.
Care to elaborate?
This is what happens when you have 4 jobs at once and everybody's pulling on you at the same time. So just you should feel loved that I chose you over 3 other things that I need to do right now. So
all right, what are the other 3 things that you could be doing?
Well, the only one that I really need to discuss is that, poor Bob Wankel, who's recovering from his kidney stones that he was in the hospital on Monday.
Still hasn't passed it as of yesterday afternoon.
Still in a little bit of pain. And he was he was going to try and tough out a Crossed Up podcast, which we record every Monday and Friday morning. And he was going to try and tough it out this morning. And so he's up early and, dealing with his issue, and he's messaging me and he's like, "Hey man, I'm ready to go." But you could tell it's weak, right? You could tell it's a weak message. Like, I'm ready. I'm going to make it, blah, blah, blah. And I had to sit there and tell him, you know what?
It didn't have the regular chutzpah of a Bob Wankel text.
Sorry, Bob. Can't do it. Can't do it because I got to go do Snow the Goalie with Russ.
That's right. It's the Only Flyers podcast.
Yeah.
Biggest show in town. Some are saying.
And, because the original thought was that this was going to be recorded yesterday, and then it didn't happen. And so therefore, I didn't feel like I needed to alert Bob that this was going to be an issue this morning. And
yet here we are. All right, let's get into it.
So that's the one that the other 2 are people won't care about. So,
okay. Well, it's time. We've got people already checking in over on the YouTube. Oh yeah, Friday, says Tim. Eat a Snickers, says HC.
Yes.
Allison says good morning.
Morning, Allison.
Super fan Eric. Good thing I woke up to take a piss. That's right. That's right.
Exactly.
All right. And we're in that. I think we're in that part of the Flyers season now, or the off season, where we say there aren't any massive news and notes, and yet we do the show every week because we love the people. Now, we haven't had a ton of developments. One that has definitely stuck out is Tony DeAngelo has re-signed with the Carolina Hurricanes. A trade that did not happen, a move that the Flyers made to cut ties and save some money on the cap this year. And no matter what, Tony DeAngelo found his way back to Carolina. Were you surprised to see him go back to the Canes?
No, not at all. I mean, we knew all along this is what was going to happen. That originally was going to be the trade, and then once the whole thing with St. Louis kind of fell through, and Briere realized it would be more valuable to keep the retention slot than to take a flyer of a prospect. In return, I think it just we kind of knew that this is where he was going to end up in the end. The thing that I thought was that was really interesting was that what they signed him for, which was $1.6 million, which is exactly the amount of money that the Flyers are paying, like for the cap hit next year. So I just thought it was really kind of an interesting thing. They basically just said, "Hey, we'll make you whole for the year, like what you were originally going to get this year anyway, instead of having it deferred to next year, and then that net money you get next year will be a bonus for you." So, so that was really kind of a fun little nugget to it. But I mean, look, it is what it is. I mean, Tony DeAngelo was not going to have a role with the Flyers. It was a bad year for him. It was an ugly year as far as how he fit with the culture of this team. He's had issues in other cities as well. I mean, the issues here were not similar to the issues he had in other cities. It just was not a good fit. But the one place that he's seemed to really flourish and really have good be a good fit and have good relationships with the people is in Carolina. And so good for Tony that he's going to go back to a team where that is a fit for him. The one thing about Carolina, everybody always talks about, look at them as a model organization. I will say that they have good regular seasons, and then they seem to flame out in the playoffs for a reason. And I'm not necessarily certain that they fill their roster with guys who are the types of players that you need to make to win a Stanley Cup. I think that they fill their roster with players that are good players and good enough players to help you win a bunch of games and be a high seed and get into the playoffs. I think they have a really good coach, and I think that you get to a certain point and it just can't go any further. And it's weird because that's a team that doesn't like to spend a lot of money. It's a team that's always looking for a way to cut the corner with finances. It's because the ownership group isn't the greatest ownership group there. And I give them credit for doing things the way that they do to be as successful as they are. But the reality is that they would probably be more beneficial. They would probably benefit more than anybody from trying to put together a team that has a little bit more of that, heaviness to it in the bottom six or in that third pair. A little bit more of those guys who are willing to go through a wall to try and win, but maybe not as talented. That would be a benefit for them that I think that they miss a little bit come playoff time, which is why they've run into the problems that they've had in the postseason. But nevertheless, I think Tony DeAngelo is he'll be a nice fit. He'll put up some points there and he'll be happy. And Flyers are happy that he'll be happy somewhere else and not in Philadelphia.
That one's done. Everybody pour one out for Tony DeAngelo. He found his way back to where he wanted to be all along. We can all move on. Adam Glikas asks over on YouTube, any Frosty updates? # not the ones from Wendy's. I could go for a Frosty. And before you answer this, what are your thoughts on dipping the Wendy's fries into a chocolate Frosty? Have you tried it?
Can I just answer the question about Morgan Frost, because I think that's the most ridiculous thing you've
Oh
ever
my,
asked me.
come on, Mr.
That might
Grumpy
be the most
Grumpy Ghost.
ridiculous thing you've ever asked me.
That's not true.
Dipping French fries into ice cream is what
Into a Frosty. There's a difference.
Okay. What do you think a Frosty is, Russell?
It is a loose dairy treat that is based with dairy. I want people. All right, listen. People on YouTube are already weighing in. All right, people on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, please let us know. Have you ever dipped French fries from Wendy's into a Frosty? If so, was it chocolate or vanilla? I can't believe. Look at this. Zilla 092. That's the only way to eat fries.
No.
Frosty.
Eat their fries. So in other words,
there you go. I mean, that still counts. There goes my camera. See, this hasn't happened. This hasn't happened on Snow the Goalie. It's happened on these other shows. All right. So that's their only way to eat their fries is the Frosty. Adam says yes.
Yeah. No,
HC, salty and sweet. Erica Brunner. Yes. Vanilla. All right. There we go.
That's great.
Okay. Jeff Miller's really triggered by the fact that we occasionally talk about things that aren't specifically hockey in the throes of the offseason. Jeff, go have a coffee.
I agree with Russ on that one, Jeff. I mean, in all honesty, it's July 28th.
But we do appreciate you being here live with us.
There's only so much you can do, right?
I'm going to keep popping these up for the people on YouTube. But all right, go ahead. So any updates on Frosty?
So so the only thing is that the reason that I think this hasn't happened yet is because we're talking about a difference in what both sides want to do. Like I think that the number is about fair, right? I mean, that I think that they're probably looking in the same monetary area as far as AAV, which is probably in that 2.5 million range through maybe 3, right? But I don't think that the Flyers want to give him anything more than a couple years, because I think that they feel like he still has to show that what he did at the end of last season, once the pressure was kind of off that team, is something that he can do on a more regular basis. And because I think that the one unknown for this organization right now is Morgan Frost a guy who just was little bit late developing and finally going to be getting to be that player that they thought they were getting when they drafted him in the first round? Or is he a guy who oh my God, my sister replied.
I know. Don't get distracted. All right, don't get Jeff upset. All right, we'll get back to that when we can. Don't interrupt your
but my thought. I'll finish my thought.
Come on now.
But no. The thing of it is that they want to see can he play at that level, in games that matter, a little bit more. And I think that that's what we're waiting to see from Morgan Frost. And that's why the Flyers want to be a little bit more short term. I think that Frost and his agent are trying to cash in on a good finish to the season and have him, get a little bit more out of this deal. Maybe a little bit more length. So I think that that's kind of where things are being held up at the moment. I don't think it'll be an issue. I think ultimately they'll come to an agreement. This is not going to be a big deal. They'll get it finalized. There's still plenty of time to do that. It's just a matter of getting a little bit more on the same page as far as the term.
Okay, that's a good answer, Ant. Meanwhile, people in the comments, I have to say that this is upsetting to me. Who doesn't do fries and nuggets and a Frosty? It's the best, says Trevor. But he's not the only one to say that. Or no, it was Trevor up here. Fries and nuggets. I've never done nuggets and a Frosty. I'm not going there. We do have to go back really quickly to a point from before, because we had a Facebook commenter check in. Danielle Sanfilippo Mascali says, yes, absolutely. Come on, Ant. Don't you remember us dipping our pretzels in our water ice when we were kids? Salty and sweet. Salty and sweet, Anthony.
Let me say this. So, that's my younger sister.
Oh, she's calling you out on your hypocrisy. I love it, Danielle. Please, whenever you want,
I never
hop on the live stream.
I never dipped pretzels in water ice. She may have done that, and my cousins may have done that because they used to pal around all together, right? But I was the older of the group, was not my thing. So maybe they did it, and I probably scoffed at them when they did it back then too. Like, this is ridiculous. I would never do that.
Old curmudgeon as a kid.
I probably was, and I'll tell you that today I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't dip pretzels
Danielle,
in water.
what I need you to do is I need you to get together with the rest of the SanFilippo clan. You're going to go back through old albums, old photo albums, and you're going to find dirt on your brother. And then we're going to connect, and we're going to present the case against your brother.
Yeah,
because I don't believe him. Because I genuinely don't believe him. All right. And one of the other things that continues to kind of pop up here this offseason has been one of the I guess hypocrisies, the way, and it kind of comes back to the DeAngelo thing a little bit, the hypocrisy of how this league handles different cases. And in the case of the Flyers and the Hurricanes, they were very on top of it, claiming it was a CBA issue. And yet we continue to see, and I believe it was Charlie O'Connor tweeted this out a day or two ago, that you continue to see teams that manipulate LTIR, playoff teams that can put a guy on LTIR, leave him there, and then the playoffs come around, the guy comes off, and now you all of a sudden have a boost. The league has done nothing to close that loophole. They've done absolutely nothing over the last few years to address it. Do you feel like it's selective? I'm not saying that the league is targeting the Flyers, but do you think it's weird that they were so adamant about blocking a trade, but then on the other hand, they're fine with allowing what's essentially, if we're calling it what it is, it's salary cap circumvention by playoff teams manipulating LTIR?
Well, in all honesty, yeah, I mean, look, in all honesty, the bad teams can just as easily manipulate it, right? I mean, they throw guys on LTIR, throw contracts onto LTIR of players that they never, plan on using just to, facilitate a trade or get an extra draft pick asset. I mean, why should that be allowed as a contender hiding, non-injured players on LTIR, and then suddenly they're, oh my God, they're all well for the playoffs. Everything's great. Like it's just it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that these things go on, and that's what it's part of the reason why I argue that the NHL is poorly run, because I think that they make mistakes like this all the time, where they allow stuff to go on that you sit there and go, that shouldn't be allowed, and yet they just continue to allow it, and teams take advantage of it. Granted, I understand you can't reopen the collective bargaining agreement once you have it in place, but it's not like this is something that's been brand new. These are ways that teams have tried to circumvent the salary cap for such a long time. And at this point now you're at a juncture where the league basically screwed themselves, in a sense where, the players' escrow is all but paid off. I mean, there's very, very, very little left that's from the pandemic, right? That needs to be paid off. And the owners could have just as easily said, you know what, it's such a small number. Let's have the salary cap go up now. Players can make a little bit more money this year after we've had such a flat cap for 3-4 seasons now. But they didn't. They got greedy.
Yep.
They got greedy. And so what ends up happening is that now it's like, okay, well, we're going to find ways to pay players if we want to be good. And the way we're going to pay the players, these handful of teams are going to do this. The way we're going to do it is we are going to use LTIR to our advantage, and that's what happens. So, I mean, look, it's just ridiculous that the NHL favors 7 teams who don't want to spend money, as opposed to the 24 teams that do want to spend money. It's an embarrassment. But this is how Gary Bettman keeps himself in his position as the commissioner of the league, because he gets the support of those small market teams that don't want to spend. And this is what it has wrought, and it's why the NHL continues to struggle to find its footing amongst the top 4 sports.
Yeah, I mean, there was a question in the comments about when does the CBA expire, because presumably at some point the players are going to have to fight back.
I'm trying to remember when
it's at the end of the 25-26 season.
Yeah,
they extended the current CBA agreement back around the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it was going to expire in September of last year, but as part of getting the league back to play in 2020 during the pandemic,
right, it was extended to 2026.
They extended to 26. Yeah. The thing that I'll never forgive the league for, and I think the thing that a lot of people will never forgive, the league for, is this is the only sports league, the only professional sports league in North American sports of any real value, no offense if there are fringe things that I'm not taking into account, that has not raised their cap or raised their cap significantly, even through COVID. The NBA continued to rise. MLB doesn't have one. I know that the way that the NBA thing works is a little bit different now. There's the apron and there's more luxury tax implications, but you see players getting ridiculous money. Jaylen Brown just signed a $300 million contract for 5 years. It's the stupidest deal I've seen in a long time, but those are still in place. The NFL continues to grow. Major League Baseball, no cap, but they continue to grow. Hockey is the only one that said, no, we're okay where we're at. And it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. So hopefully when they negotiate a new CBA, the players will get something out of it. There will actually be something of value here. And teams that want to spend will be allowed to spend. Because to your point, the 7 that don't, I mean, honestly, they don't have a place in the league. If you're not going to spend, like, Ant, put on your crossed up hat for a second. The Oakland A's don't spend, right? Mm-hmm. They're a bad team, like a dreadfully bad team. They wanted a new stadium. Oakland said no. They kept going back and forth. If you're Oakland, why do you want to use public funds and public tax money to build this team a new stadium when they don't spend as is? If you're a fan of that team, like, how happy can you really be that they don't spend? The rest of the American League spends. The rest of the majors, for the most part, spends. Like, if you have figured out a way, back to like the Moneyball idea of maximizing your ROI because you spend little and you get exponentially greater production, that's one thing. But that's not what's happening here. And in the case of these 7 teams, it's not what is happening. You just see a bunch of bottom feeding teams that are happy to collect rev share money. And it at some point you have to penalize it. You know, if you're doing due diligence by the other teams in the league, the other 23, then like you need to start penalizing these teams. It can't just be some ridiculously low floor that they have to meet. There has to be actual, I don't know, implications for not attempting to spend and attempting to win.
Well, I mean, so the NHL does have a floor with they do have a salary floor, and they did put that in place a few years back because teams were getting a little ridiculous with not spending up to the, closer to the cap. And that's fine. I mean, do I think it can come up? Yeah, I do. I think it's a little too low, but that needs to be in place. And if you go on like Cap Friendly right now, you're going to see that teams are actually probably closer to the cap maybe than they've ever been before, and that's because it's been a flat cap for 4 years, right? Yeah. So I think other than Anaheim, I think it's the only team right now that's not at the floor, which I believe the floor is like 60. I want to say it's 62 million, and the cap is, I think, 83 or 82, whatever it is, right? Whatever, but it only went up $1 million. So I mean, it's pretty good spread. I mean, it's a $20 million spread, right? I mean, that's, could it be a little bit closer? Maybe. But really, you're going to see these teams. They're saying, well, okay, you're saying that there's these teams that they don't spend. Well, they're closer to the cap now because the cap hasn't moved. And so you have to pay guys something, right? So that's why they've gotten closer. But when this cap goes back up again in, next year, 2 years from now, really, when it really kicks, they're going to say in 2 seasons, you're going to see a huge jump in the cap. That's when you're going to see the separation again. And you're going to see teams back at the bottom. I mean, Arizona's been down there for years and years and years. Carolina's a team that doesn't usually spend a lot. I mean, they're right near the top of the cap right now, but they're not. They're a team that likes to not spend that much money. Buffalo, Nashville, Columbus has never been a big money team. When you look around, Ottawa has never really been, although they just signed Tarasenko, right? So they're getting closer to the cap this year.
They're getting there,
slowly
but surely.
But I mean, you're talking about, these are teams that just for years and years and years. I mean, look, when a team like Chicago or a team like Anaheim, Detroit even goes down and they're at the bottom of this. And you say, well, how come they're not spending? Well, they're part of a rebuild, right? So you can kind of understand that. But those teams have a history of spending money, so it's not like they don't ever spend. But there are always teams that are either not spending at all, or when they look like they're spending, like this year, it's only because of the finances of the league that make it look that way. I'll just remind people right now, I've said this before on the show, the year before the institution of the salary cap. So the salary cap comes into play in the 2005-2006 season, right? So the last season that they played before the canceled year, which was the lockout year. So 2003-2004 was the last year without a salary cap. The Flyers team payroll that year was $70 million. Here we are 20 years later, almost 20 seasons later, and the salary cap is only $13 million above that 20 seasons later. They were spending $70 million in 03-04, and now here it is in 23-24 season, and the cap's 83. And the cap went down. The first year of the cap, it was $39 million. Flyers had to, now the league gave teams 2 years to get compliant, really. But they had to go from $70 million payroll to a $39 million payroll.
Yep.
That first year. Do you think that was do you think the big market clubs are the ones that wanted that $39 million cap? I mean, when you're spending $70 million, no, that's $39 million is nothing to you, right? So the problem is the teams at the bottom who were like, well, we can't compete, we can't spend. Tough.
Yep.
Then don't own a team.
Yep.
Don't be in that market. That sucks, right? I mean, This is the problem with the NHL. I don't know if you've paid attention. Like they're talking about, there's a lot of been conversation about, should we move teams, expansion, et cetera, et cetera. They're thinking about going back to Atlanta for a third frigging time in this city. In this sport. I mean,
Atlanta. So here's the
twice there.
But here's the thing. So if you look at Atlanta, right, it won't work. But what they're probably looking at is what happened with Atlanta United, the MLS team, right? Atlanta got a soccer team. The fan base boomed in a big way. They were filling up. What is it? Mercedes-Benz Stadium or whatever, right? Yeah. Where the Falcons play.
Yeah.
Arthur Blank owns that team. They were filling that entire stadium up, like in ways that the Falcons hadn't in years. Like they're probably looking at it saying, this is a huge moment and like we can probably capitalize, but it won't work. It's not going to work. It's stupid. It's like they aren't innovative enough to think of actual hockey markets that can work. And they're just trying to capitalize on what's going on in other cities. Now,
Atlanta may be the worst sports city in America. Professional sports.
I don't know. Is it though?
What's worse? Professional sports.
I can come up with a few.
The Braves, Falcons, Hawks don't draw. Hockey's failed there twice. What's worse?
There have to be worse ones. LA doesn't show up.
Yeah, but they have a pretty good. Miami's right there with them. I would say T from the 203. Our buddy Trevor. Miami's right there. But I think that there is at least a fan base for the Dolphins down there that's decent.
Phoenix had a hard time getting people to Suns games when they were but like Phoenix, right? The Suns were one of the best teams in the Western Conference last year. They go out and acquire Kevin Durant. People still aren't showing up in droves, right? The Arizona Cardinals. People didn't show up for the Cardinals. They weren't a good team.
Phoenix isn't great, but it's better than Atlanta.
I don't know. Hey, here's an idea. If we want to go the soccer route, Robert Hunton says Salt Lake City should get a team.
I agree.
That would at least be like if you're going to try to build off of the idea of go for rabid fan bases, niche sports. And I don't know how you feel about it. Soccer and hockey, both niche in their own way. If it works in one, it can potentially work in another. Salt Lake City makes sense.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'll give the NHL credit for is they were the first sport to bring a team to Vegas. And we saw you see what that, what that did out there. And now, granted, they made it so that they would be good right away. So that kind of helped. But nevertheless, yes, I agree that you go into untapped markets, and I think that you will find, and it's not to say Salt Lake City is an untapped market. They do have the Jazz, right? They've had them for a long time, and Real Salt Lake, is that what their MLS team is?
Yeah, acting like you don't know. You closeted soccer fan, you.
And I only know that because a guy I work with lives out there, and he's a huge fan. But like they draw really well, so I think that's a untapped market for hockey. Yes, I think Houston. Allison is correct.
Right. Yeah, Houston.
Yes, Houston is an untapped market. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually Portland is something that you can consider for the U.S. But you also should probably go back to Quebec City. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about that for a long time, and that's another one that really could, should have it as well. So, I mean, I think these markets make a little bit more sense to try hockey rather than go back to something that has failed twice before. I mean, it doesn't, but they know. I mean, I think Bettman looks at it and goes, well, if we put a team in Atlanta, I know that that's a team that we can, that will fit into that gang of 7, 8 small market cities that doesn't want to spend money, that will keep costs down in the NHL. You go into a bigger market, they're going to want to spend, and it changes things.
A lot of people want to see the Whalers come back, by the way.
There was a politician up there who made a big push to the NHL to reconsider Hartford, but I just don't think I don't think you have enough of a market there because it's where it's situated between New York and Boston. Most people up there are either Bruins fans or Rangers fans or Islanders, I guess, even a little bit. But there's just not enough of I think a market for a fan base at this point in Connecticut. I think that it's been a long time since the Whale were viable. I mean, we're talking over 20 years now. So you're really a whole generation, and most of that generation, if they're hockey fans, they've grown up supporting the Bruins or grown up supporting a New York team. I just don't see it as a real possibility at this point.
I want to go back to this one really quick. Kyle Goss says Shohei Ohtani is going to have the first $1 billion contract while McDavid is still making $10 million a year. The NHL is ridiculous. I brought up Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, I think, is going to make I want to say it's $39 million in the first year of his deal, which I think is 24-25. The final year of that 5-year deal, he's going to be making $69 million for a single season. At the beginning of this week, there was the rumor about Kylian Mbappe, probably the best player in the world, plays for Paris Saint-Germain in Ligue 1. He has eyes for Real Madrid in Spain. His contract is up next year. And there was a thought that perhaps I forget what the name of the Saudi Arabian team was, that they would offer him $700 million for a single year, and that would allow him to go there for the Saudi team to pay off the rest of his deal to PSG, and that he would then be able to go to Real Madrid for free or on free transfer where they don't have to send anything to PSG. But $700 million for a single season. We saw Lionel Messi work out a rev share deal where he's getting a kickback for every MLS package subscription on Apple TV. It seems like every other league is compensating the players. Now, we can say far too much. Is $69 million for Jaylen Brown too much? Yes. Is $700 million for Kylian Mbappe too much? Probably. But like Kyle's right. $10 million a year for Connor McDavid, by far the best player in the league, is insane relative to what else is going on in sports.
The only thing I will say in defense of the NHL, and it's a very, I don't want to call it a weak argument, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said for it. And maybe this is just me being an old man saying this, but keeping the salaries a little bit lower allows the leagues and teams to maintain some level of control over the operation. Whereas when the individual player salaries get so out of hand and so ridiculous, you get leagues where the players run the show. They decide who gets to play where and who's playing with who. And that should not be the case, right?
Yep.
That's part of the problem that those sports have. And the other sports all do it to an extent. I mean, maybe not the NFL, because the NFL doesn't guarantee their contracts, but any sport that guarantees contracts can really dictate that kind of stuff, like where the players can determine who's playing with who, and that's not a good thing. So while I think the NHL needs to be better with their finances, at the same time, I understand why they want to keep the maximum level of contracts down, because it maintains control for teams in the league, which invariably is a good thing for the sport.
Hey, by the way, I don't know if I don't know if we can get Connor McDavid more money. I don't know if NHL players can afford this or not, but I know that they can afford what we're about to talk about. And that, of course, is a free subscription to walkingtheboards.com. Of course, walkingtheboards.com is the go-to place for all news and notes about what's going on in Ocean City, New Jersey. If you like going down the shore and you love Ocean City, you want to know, hey, is my favorite restaurant from last year still there? How about the putt-putt? A little putt-putt fan? You've gone to all the courses? Perhaps there's a new putt-putt course you haven't tried before. You're going somewhere on the boardwalk. I don't know. Listen, you go to walkingtheboards.com. The link is in the description of this episode. Walkingtheboards.com was founded by Kyle Scott, the founder of CrossingBroad.com, and he and former Crossing Broad investor Mike Iredale set out to create what they're calling Crossing Broad for the Shore. You go over to walkingtheboards.com, you subscribe to their newsletter. It is free when you sign up, when you subscribe for free. There's no upsell. They do have a second newsletter that you can subscribe to, Shore Cribs. If you have aspirations of owning a home in Ocean City someday, or perhaps you have the capital right now to go out and buy a home and you want to get to compare everything that's going on, upcoming listings, all that, Shore Cribs is another place to go. So head over to walkingtheboards.com, get your news and notes about America's greatest family resort. And I know that we've been talking about this for a while. The Ocean City's Night in Venice Parade is on July 29th, Saturday. And the guy that we interviewed a couple episodes ago, Dan Hilferty, the CEO of Comcast Spectacor and governor of the Philadelphia Flyers, will be on a float with Gritty. If you go down to Ocean City, if you're at the Night in Venice Parade and you see Dan Hilferty, you can yell to him, "We saw you on Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast." And he'll say, "Yes, you did," or something. Maybe he'll throw you a shirt. Who knows? Who's to say? Walkingtheboards.com, in the link. Subscribe today. Again, it's free. Anthony, speaking of free, Ivan Fedotov is.
Hold on. You got to bring up. Because I'm going to give you props here for a second. Jen Calliser kind of made a comment. 8:09. Should we time Russ's commercial today?
I had a stopwatch over here. It was a minute 45.
You know, I actually did the same thing.
Did the
same thing.
Yep.
Yes, minute 45. He's
that's
getting
90,
closer.
That's 90. Wait, no. Yes, no. That's
105 seconds.
105 seconds. Well, we're close enough.
Yeah, you're getting closer.
Close enough.
You're getting closer.
JToxic49 wants to know how much to sponsor an episode, but Ant to do the reads. It's a good question. You can send us an email, snowthegoalie@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I guarantee I'll keep it at 60 seconds.
Oh, man. Jeff Miller, very upset. Sponsors, merchandise, STG becoming too corporate. I know. We spent years not taking on sponsors. We spent years being asked to create merch. I know. We are the Antichrist, Anthony.
Yeah,
we're just awful. You know what? Just to make Jeff Miller happy. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go over to the super chats button and you can get your comment up to the top. You can leave a tip and you can leave a super chat.
See, Jeff Miller.
If you're watching
Miller
after the fact, you could do a super thanks, and a super thanks is like the same thing, but it's for after you watch back. I can talk about all the great things that YouTube has for monetization if we want to, keep this going, Jeff. CMAC thinks that Jeff is a burner for another Flyers podcast, which would be weird because there's only one and you're watching it. All right. Anyway. Math is hard, says Jen. It's true. We haven't talked about shop.snowthegoalie.com, but of course, that's where you can go for all your merch. And I did see CMAC before we started the episode asked, are there going to be more shirts coming in September? And I think the answer to that is yes. We might actually have something coming in August. So keep an eye out. We do have a few shirts that we're working on. Many of them are Bundy related. So, get yourselves ready. What was that sound? All right. I don't know what's happening. Was there a comment that I didn't see?
Jay Toxic. He's just the guy who makes me laugh, man.
Snow the Goalie OnlyFans. Snow the OnlyFans. How about that? Actually, no, I don't like how that sounds.
No.
Listen,
no.
if there's one person who's going to be doing anything for OnlyFans, it ain't me. Maybe it's Anthony. Anthony's got a wedding coming up.
No, it ain't me.
Show the ankles, Ant. Just the ankles. Maybe a little bit of calf. Mid calf is as far as it goes. Jeff Miller sticks it to us with a $1.99 super chat. Bless
Thanks,
you,
Jeff.
Bless you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right. So I was saying before, speaking of the free man, right? Ivan Fedotov. There was an update that came out that the IIHF was looking into the deal that he has with the KHL and the deal that was presented by the Flyers. To my knowledge, there's been no update since. I think that was at the beginning of this week or the end of last week that it was announced that the IIHF was involved. Do you think that there's any chance that they're going to rule in favor of the Flyers having a valid contract, or like where do you see this one landing?
Who knows, Russ? I mean, the thing with this thing is that,
does it even matter? Let me ask you that too.
Well,
does it even matter like what their findings are?
Well, no.
Okay.
I mean, the guy's going to play where he wants to play. Like if Russia doesn't want to, there's no agreement right now, right? There is certainly no agreement in place between the NHL and the KHL. Now, the owners of the teams and the managements of the teams, they try to keep a hush hush behind the scenes. Hey, we'll honor each other's kind of agreements sometimes, right? I mean, and they do work together. Hey, the Flyers are loaning what's the kid's name? Kolosov, the goalie. They're loaning him to a KHL team, right? So there's obviously has to be some communication between the Flyers and that KHL team to have that arrangement in place. So these things do happen, right? But I'm not even certain what, the IIHF can investigate all they want. If Ivan Fedotov wants to play in Russia and SK St. Petersburg doesn't want to honor the Flyers contract, they're just going to do it. And that's just going to be it. And you don't have a choice, right? So what's the big deal? I have never seen, I got to say this, guys, I have never seen so much anxiety over a player who we have no idea if he would be any good in this league, who's 27 years old now. I mean, he might be, but even
the
if
window to contend right now,
even if he comes over, that's the thing. Even if he comes over, right? Even let's say Fedotov is playing this shady game where he's saying, "Oh, I'm going to play in Russia," and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, sneaks out of the country and defects to the United States and honors his contract with the Flyers. Does everyone think he's going to just come right in and play for the Flyers and be good? It's not going to happen. They're not going to make him he has to go play in the AHL first, because you just don't come over after playing in European rinks for your entire life and then just come play in NHL and North American rinks, which are smaller, especially for a goalie with all the angles being different, and just suddenly be, oh yeah, no problem, simple adjustment. He's going to need at least a season in the AHL, right, before he gets an opportunity to play in the NHL, and then you don't even know if he's good enough to play at the NHL level. I mean, there are always players who are really good in a European league, and you say, best player not in North America. And then all of a sudden they get here and they're either just a guy or not good enough at all. I mean, if I want to say this for some older Flyers fans, but do we remember when the Flyers signed, was it Yuri Depota, who everyone said was the best player not playing in the NHL, best player in the world not playing in the NHL? And he came in here. I think he had a 4-goal game, one game, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, look at this guy!" And then what happened? Where did he go? He disappeared because he just wasn't good enough to play in this. There was a reason he was the best player to not play in the NHL, because he wasn't good enough to play in the NHL. So it's crazy to me that there is such excitement about, and we're monitoring what Fedotov's doing in his contract. Oh my God, is he coming over? Is he not coming over? Like, they have better goalie prospects than Ivan Fedotov.
I think that part of it, though, Ant,
including Sam Urson, who's already played in the NHL.
I think part of it is the human interest story, because it looked like he was going to be coming over, and then there's the unmarked van, and all of a sudden he's like sent to Siberia to go serve a military like to do the military service, all that. I think that that's part of it. And I do think that there are still people who want to see this team have as many potential replacements in place, whether you trade Carter Hart or if he's involved in the Hockey Canada report. Like, I think people just want to see that there is a plan to fill that gap, to fill that void if Carter Hart isn't playing here next year. I think it's a big part of it. And also, Ant, he's a big guy. He's played for the Russian national team. There's a thought that, and an excitement. And I think there should be an excitement. People should be allowed to be excited about it. And then, like, to your point, you come up with the logistics later, right? Like, all right, if he has to play in the A for a year, fine. If they need to work this thing out and he needs more time, fine. You could make the case that it's actually not a bad thing for him to play a year in Russia. He apparently had been quoted as saying, like, the military hockey games are not the same thing as playing in the KHL. So he's going to have to refine his form anyway. I don't know. I saw a lot of people got really excited that the IIHF was back in on this and like that they were going to monitor it, but like I don't think that anything's going to happen.
No, I don't want to poo-poo it completely, because the Flyers do think that there's a talented player there, right? But my thought process is that the benefit for the Flyers in Fedotov actually coming over here at some point is as an asset and not as a player that you want to have as part of your roster going forward, at least long term. I mean, in all honesty, to me, that he's an asset to send off to because you have so much goalie depth, right? You have the kid Urson, you have Kolosov, you drafted 2 more goalies this year. Like, there's some real depth here at the position. So if you're in the middle of at the beginnings of a rebuild, why are you excited about a 27-year-old goalie that has never played over here before? I mean, a team that's more close to being ready to contend and is looking for a goaltender, maybe that's a team that you work with.
Brandon Zimmerman says this reminds me of Zherdev. We all know how that went. I love Zherdev. Zherdev's great.
My all-time favorite.
Michael Hoffman,
my all-time favorite Zherdev story, Russ, was it was literally right before he was leaving the team. And we all wanted to talk to him because he had been benched and he wasn't playing and whatever. And we all wanted to talk to him. And he sneezes. He says, yeah, the Flyers say, yeah, he's going to come talk. And we're all waiting in the locker room. And then he never comes out. And we're like, what happened? And it turns out he snuck out of a side door at the practice facility, and no one saw him sneak out. And when the PR guy calls him to find out what happened, he said he didn't want to come talk to us because one of the reporters looked like a Russian mafia guy. And he was referencing Panaccio. He felt like Panaccio was in the Russian mafia.
Well, Anthony, I don't know if
it was so great. It was
Panaccio and the Russian mob. Hey, by the way, Michael Hoffman noted that Bobrovsky came over without playing in the AHL. So conceptually, yes, I guess probably more of an anomaly. Whenever
it doesn't really happen. You don't usually get guys. You have to be and again, he was a kid coming over. He had not played for years and years and years in leagues over there, right? I mean, there's a little bit different. It's also a little bit different story. So, yes, you're right, but not many. Not many guys can do that.
This is a good point. Let the mystique grow and trade them to Toronto. They're perpetually a goalie away, and like maybe that's part of this too. Is you look at trying to acquire assets that you can try to get value back for as part of a rebuild. So if you were to bring him over, he played in the AHL, maybe mid-season gets a call up, plays well at the NHL level, and then another team gets enamored by the frame and gets enamored by what he could be, then maybe he ends up being a piece. So you say, all right, age-wise, he probably doesn't fit the 3 to 4 year rebuild window or whatever. So then maybe you are able to get something for him. If he stays in the KHL, you get nothing for him. You know, Willy Wonka, you lose, you get nothing. Good day, sir. One other thing here, really quickly, because we got a lot of comments from one person on the last video. And it was about the Hockey Canada report. And Matthew asks, when's the report coming? And he's not the only person to ask about this. But we had somebody who, Eric Berkey says right after the Epstein Island client list. We had somebody who got really upset in the last video, not that we used language that like triggered, abuse, right? Because it was a serious topic, the Hockey Canada investigation. We had somebody who especially had a problem with me because they said that I was playing social justice warrior, that apparently talking about the Hockey Canada investigation is a political issue. I just wanted to know, I don't want to put you in a bad spot. Do you view the Hockey Canada report and discussing that and the implications of it, is that a political issue?
I guess we should never report on these things. We should just let it die in darkness, right? Let it go. Nobody say a word about it. Shh, don't say anything. And then these things will continue to happen over and over and over again. And there will be no accountability. And these athletes think they can get away with everything and anything. So, I mean, if you want it to be that way, make it political.
Yeah.
Make it political if you want it to be that way. If you want it to go away, you want it to stop, then let us report on it. Let us talk about it. Let us bring light to it, right? Any issue, not just this specific one, but any one of these issues. That's how it stops happening. When you bring everything to light. That's why there's so much whistleblower stuff going on nowadays, because you want people to say, we got to get this stuff out into the open. The more we think about for years, and I don't want to, make this too serious, but think about how for forever and ever and ever, all the stuff that was going on with the priests in the Catholic Church. And then the Boston Globe does that report, and they bring everything out into the open. Right. And now how much of that abuse is happening today versus what was happening 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's you bring it out into the open and it stops, or, I mean, it doesn't, maybe if it doesn't stop, it really curbs it a lot. So that's why it's important to talk about.
Yeah.
Now, to answer the question that was asked is that Matt, I think it was Matt that asked the question, when is it coming out? I don't have an answer. I guessed last week. I said, I felt
that it might be this
it might be today,
next.
as a matter of fact, or next Friday, because the NHL did say they were going to put it out during the summer, and that they wanted it to be, during a time when things are really, not being talked about in the NHL. They want to kind of hide it in a time when nobody's really paying attention to the sport. So tonight would make today would make a day that makes sense. Friday during the summer makes the most sense. So today, next Friday, maybe the Friday after that. But I mean, it's certainly coming. I mean, my original thought was today was going to be the day.
It still might be. We don't know if it happens. What's the old adage in news? And Friday afternoon
5 o'clock.
dump. Yep.
Friday afternoon news dump. Yep.
And if it happens, if it were to happen, I'm sure that you and I would probably hop back on. We'd have to do an emergency episode we'd have to also read the report.
Right.
We'd have to
take a while.
It will take a very long time, but we would have to, because otherwise it's irresponsible to report on. Anyway, I just wanted to address that because I sat back in and I was like, so I think there's also a question of this too, because like Eric here says, how do you explain how they've let it linger this long while losing all kinds of support for Hockey Canada? Are there politics at play between the league, Hockey Canada, the police department, all that? Yes, that's its own thing.
The Canadian government.
The person's complaint was that we were somehow politicizing it, or that we shouldn't be talking about it because it's not hockey. That it's akin to, I don't know, if Ant and I came on here and we started talking about abortion. It's not the same thing. Right?
Was it wrong for us to talk last year? Was it 2 years ago to talk about the whole Chicago Blackhawks situation?
No.
We talked.
That also
we
would
talked about that on a
insane.
couple of episodes, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and it had nothing to do with the Flyers, but it was a big story in hockey, and it affects the sport that we talk about and that we cover. I mean, that's huge. I mean, to just sit there and make pretend that it didn't happen or is not, we would be just as culpable, by not sharing that information with the public. That's what we're here for, So yeah, I mean,
So we'll see.
I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on here before we?
No,
before
I'm actually 15 minutes beyond where I needed to be here, Russ. So.
Well, you know what, Ant? That's what we call love for the audience. So big kudos to you. I don't remember if we had it.
It has nothing to do with love for you, that's for sure.
Why can't you just be nice? Just one time. Actually, no, you've been nice. You've been nicer of late. So we'll allow it. I'll allow it on this one. I don't know if we had a new podcast review. Head over to Apple Podcasts if you haven't already, and you can leave a 5-star review for Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. I'll point out the rankings on Apple Podcasts. They've been in flux a little bit, but we did hit number 4 in the country. We were ahead of 32 Thoughts for a while. That was pretty cool. So we'll see how this one does. But we keep finding ourselves, Anthony, getting higher and higher and higher, which is nice, which means that people are listening to Snow the Goalie and they're spreading the word. So I will remind everyone out there who's either watching live or watching back or listening in the podcast feed after the fact that you can find this show wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. You can start the episode on the podcast, get home, sit down to do work, put us up on YouTube. You could start on YouTube. You can then finish on the podcast. You could do what some people might do: listen to the podcast and then go home or pop it on the TV, and you can watch the episode and say, man, I wish I could see what Anthony's face looked like when he said this.
Yes, because the poker face that I have, right? Russ, there were two new 5-star reviews.
Do you want to read them if you haven't pulled up?
Sure. Here's one. Great show from Esgard. Although I thought maybe you read this one. I don't know. I'll read it again, even if you did.
Okay.
First-time reviewer, short-time listener. Started listening during the lead up to the draft. Definitely makes it fun to be a Flyers fan again. I've been listening to old episodes, and you guys have had a pulse on this team for some time, and this offseason shows it. I don't think you read that one.
I did, but that's okay. It was a good review.
That was a good one.
It was a good review.
You did read it?
I did, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. And then here's one from Mike Cave 79 or Mike Cav 79. The Only Flyers podcast. Hey Bundy, what are the chances of an Ice Wars fight between Russ and Jordan Hall?
I like Jordan Hall. I don't want to Ice Wars fight Jordan Hall, but I would win.
Jordan's awesome.
But I would win.
No, I love Jordan.
But I don't want to Ice Wars fight Jordan Hall.
Just thinking of it makes me think it's funny, right? So
Jordan Hall probably has length though. I think he's got longer arms, so that might cause a problem. He's a little bit taller than me, so I don't know. I should still be able to reach high enough to make contact, but I don't want to Ice Wars Jordan Hall. Nice guy. So, all right. So there's that. Pashendi thinks that there's animosity between us. And is there animosity between us?
Never.
Stop playing the shtick for a second. Come on. You're gonna actually make people think that we hate each other.
I'll share this with that. I'll share this real quick before this will be that. Then I got to run. We have a Slack chat that still exists with all the old Crossing Broad people, right? And in that Slack chat,
allegedly, perhaps.
Yeah, I was ranking. I was ranking the people in the Slack chat who annoy me, and I put Russ at number 6 out of like 14. And people said, well, I can't believe that Russ isn't like the worst. And I said, no, Russ only annoys me some of the time. The rest of the time it is shtick, and it's part of our shtick. And so that's the truth. There are times when Russ does annoy me, but for the most part, I really like the guy. He's actually a good guy, and we get along really well, and all's great. So
Anthony really likes to lean into it. I sometimes tell him that I think it's a little bit too much, but he leans into it. It's fine. This is what we are, these people, you know? But there you go. Trevor says, the more you know.
Yeah.
All right. So
yeah.
Anyway, we just ended on a warm and fuzzy. So let's end on the warm and fuzzy, shall we? Thanks for listening to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. As we mentioned a few times, Available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also head over to shop.snowthegoalie.com to find merch. Got the logos, the crest, Mishkov Mania, the Bundy Butte shirt. We'll be adding more stuff there. There's shirts, there's hoodies, there's mugs, all kinds of stuff. So head on over to shop.snowthegoalie.com. Support the show. By the way, Ant, I forgot to mention this. Last week, right after we got done doing the show, and by the way, thank you to Ryan for checking in from Helsinki. Last week, we got an order from Australia for the Snow the Goalie store.
That's
so
awesome.
that right now takes the cake as the farthest order that we've had to send. So Australia.
Let me know when
ship on the
Fedotov
babbing.
orders one from Siberia.
Listen, he might. Fedotov's he's gonna order something and then he's gonna send it back as a return, but it's gonna have like a little note in there, like, help me.
Help me. I don't want to play here.
I don't know why he has that voice. All right. Zach O says, have a great weekend. Thanks as always. Thank you, Zach. And thank you to everyone who joined us live on a Friday morning. And those of you who watch the show back after the fact. And those of you who listen to the podcast feed. And like we said before, share the show with someone you know. Share it with any Flyers fan in your life. Let them know about Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. We'll be back next week. And I believe next week we'll be back with the busy but always ever loving Chris Terrian. Bundy will be back next week. For Ant, I'm Russ. We'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend. Stay out of trouble.